Welcome back to another episode of Notorious Autosports. This week we are going to be doing a Cobra brake conversion, rear axle swap, and upper and lower control arm swap on this 88 T-Top GT. This week we are doing a little more DIY content, but switching it up a little bit. Originally, when this car was proposed to me for the job, it was a 5-lug swap. Well, I rolled in the driveway today at the shop to see these wheels already on the car. So it's already got 5-lug. However, it is drum brake and it looks like Lincoln rotor or something like that. Stock calipers up front. So we've got this Cobra diff here. Got OEM Cobra calipers, brackets, anti-moan brackets, all of that. And only thing is it's got full-on SN axles there. We don't want that. So I'm gonna try and retain this proper track width here. I've got a set of axles of mine actually that I actually had up for sale, and conveniently the gentleman with this car wanted to buy those to put in that diff to be able to use that. It's all fresh. He's had it for a while. It's all freshly painted, probably 8 or 10 years ago. So it's got a little bit of markup from moving around, but it's a clean housing. We've got that. We've got SN 9495 front spindles and Cobra calipers. Well, they're actually out back in the other shop. They just freshly got painted. So we're gonna do that this weekend. Been quite a while since I've actually done a 5-lug conversion. I did one on Infamous's Stalker Vert back 15 years ago, somewhere around there. Maybe not quite that long, but bordering on that. We did North Race Car brackets, Cobra calipers and that, but it's been a while. So some of this will be me kind of going through it and figuring out a couple things as I go. I'm sure it's pretty straightforward. Done enough reading over the years that should just go together. We got some SN ball joints coming, proper Cobra brake hoses for the front. There is a different thread on the brake line on the car on the front compared to the Cobra flex lines or brake hoses. So may need to either get some adapters. The easiest way is probably just to cut the flare off, put the proper fitting on, and reflare it. I like to have as minimal amount of joints in brake lines or fuel lines as possible. Less spots to leak. So we're gonna get into this. I'm gonna tear this diff apart. It was actually at another shop, and they said there was no way to make this stuff work, which I'm not exactly sure how or why or what the problem was. Because what you do is you cut these brackets here, cut a quarter out of them so that they can slip over the axle tube on the inside of the flange, put the Fox length axles in it, and then things work. So not sure, but we're gonna get stuck into it here. Good weekend project, should be fun. Got some parts showing up tomorrow. Probably just be able to get the back done this week, as there are a couple pieces that I am waiting for. One, the splitter for the parking brake cable off the handle. I've got SN parking brakes cables that should be showing up tomorrow, so we can at least put them up there, just can't hook it up. And then flex hoses, actually apparently one side there is 0 ETA on it, so I'm gonna have to order them from another location, get them brought in. So we'll probably leave the front until next week, just so I don't have open brake lines, and there's no point in doing it halfway and having to push it back at the door. So enough of that. Let's get stuck into it. All right, so the owner of this car has had a little change of plans. There's been a couple of back and forths, and we're actually back to I think plan B, but it's actually plan D, because plan B and D are the same, but plan A and C were the same, and we've gone through a little bit of confusion. What's happening now at the moment, which again could change, is he is going to come and bring us another set of Cobra brake brackets. Even though there's a set on this diff, I guess we're getting a different set, and they're gonna go on that rear end, which is in the car, which is also what plan B was, but using these brackets. But then he changed his mind. We were gonna use the Cobra diff, but now we're back to using that diff. So I'm just as confused as you are. But right now, I'm gonna take this apart. I'm gonna pull some wheels off, drop the diff down. I've got control arms to do anyways, so I'm at least going to get the control arms disconnected, even if I just have the diff on some stands. If it's determined that we are indeed going to do that diff, then I will just put the control arms back in the new ones, and then mount it back up in the car, and then do the the Cobra brake conversion on the back. I'm going to get stuck into it here, get some things pulled apart, and try and make some progress here. Alright, so I got half the fasteners undone. Well, one side of all the fasteners undone, upper and lower control arms here, except for up at the upper torque boxes. These bolts in the shocks, they'll come out. The bolts in the lower control arms are seized in the bushings. Looks like both ends. The uppers, I think, should come apart, which will be all right. And they actually look like they've been replaced at some point. There is some incorrect hardware on there. Which is kind of, well, we'll have to fix that. These are going to be a little fun on the lower control arms though, so we'll see what forms of removal can be taken there. I'm assuming I'm probably going to have to get out torches. Fight it with fire. So we'll get stuck into that. Just try and get as much part tonight of this as I can. And then move on to the front. Here we go. All right, so I'll get you in here a little closer. What I'm fighting with is this bolt being seized in the sleeve that is going through that bushing. The bushing is not actually holding on to the sleeve anymore, so the bolt is just, well, the bolt and sleeve is spinning on the inside. Try applying heat to the head of the bolt to try and get it to transfer through into the sleeve. Same thing on the threaded side, and then actually got up and heated the sleeve up some as well. It's doing nothing. We're now at the point that it is essentially quicker to lop the head off that bolt and lop the threads off that bolt. I like OEM fasteners a lot better than aftermarket stuff, but there's a certain point in time where it's no longer worth your effort. If I can find some fasteners that will work for these lower control arms, which unfortunately they did not come with, although they are really nice upper and lower control arms, we might be opting for that, because there's only a certain amount of time that is worth putting into something like that before you are just kind of well, getting to the definition of insanity. So we'll look and see if we can find some fasteners, see what's kicking around the shop. There's a whole bunch of stuff over there, grade 8, grade 10, lots of really nice stuff. So I'm gonna go digging, see what I can find. So we're M12 bolts in the lowers. I was able to find some. Right diameter, yes. Right length, no. So we may end up having to call the hardware shop tomorrow, get some of those, get something in a grade 10.9 that is going to be appropriate for this application, and then we can at least put it back together There's probably some actual stock hardware kicking around somewhere from Infamous's. Maybe I'll raid his stash in the sea can. But for now, just need to get this apart. And Shop Dad may also have some stuff available that he knows where it is, hiding around here somewhere once he returns here shortly. So we'll just keep on going, trying to get stuff apart, fighting with these bolts. Might be asking why I'm back at this differential. Well, plans have changed. Yet again, we are back to plan A, C, and now E, which are the same, which is using this differential. So I have to swap the axles. It has SN95 style axles, which are too long. So we are going to be swapping to Fox length axles and then relocating these axle brackets to the inside of the flange. So to start, you got your bolt with the cross pin, which unfortunately with these braces here, they're right in the way. So the bolt doesn't want to come out. I'm going to have to unbolt the carrier caps, pull the cross pin, and then C-clips are nice and easy to work on here. I'll get you in a little closer once I get that actually apart. Oh, rotated it just a little bit more. Got lucky. Pull the cross pin out here. That bolt just goes through there, keeps it from coming out. A lot of times if it's kind of tight and sticky, you get a little bit of a burr or something, you can push it out a little bit, put your pin in there, and then, or your bolt, sorry, use it enough to pull that cross pin out. So then axles, if you push them in, then we have these C-clips, which are in here. So axle out, axle in, and then we got horseshoe clips or C-clips. I call them C-clips, most people do. And they will drop through the wafer spring down into the bottom of the housing here. These ones are a little tight because there's actually a rubber O-ring in there, which I have never run into before. So on the screwdriver, press those down, they'll end up down here, pull them out, and then the axles will come out the end of the axle tube. Two C-clips. Axles are now ready to come out. Here is a perfect length comparison of Fox length axle to SN95 axle. If you're using these, you can leave this caliper flange on the outside of the flange that is on the end of the axle tube. That will push things out 3/4 of an inch on either side, so you have to accommodate for that with your wheel choice. If you want to run standard Fox wheels, these are Fox length shafts, Aerostar, old Aerostar, or Ranger. You need 2 of those donor vehicles because they have unequal length axles, so you need 2 from one side. I believe it's left side Ranger and right side Aerostar. Or you can also find many manufacturers these days that just have 29 spline Fox length axles, or 31 spline Fox length axles, and put them in even an SN housing, flip this bracket. What we're actually going to do is cut here so that this can slide over the axle tube from the backside. Got these nice crusty looking axle seals. Good thing those new ones showed up this morning. And we'll pop those out, get these axles in, undo these brackets before we do that, and then we can fit them up and get them on the inside. This also has Cobra anti-moan brackets, so this bolts from the flange to the tube and is supposed to cut down for reverberations, usually when backing up and braking. Some people use them, some people don't. Some people have problems without them, other people don't. I think a lot of it depends on your brake pads too, so that is up to you. If you want it cleaner, try it without. If you have a problem, find some, or if you already had some, put them back on. So we're gonna get this cleaned up and rinsed out a little bit, get some gear oil out of that housing, get those axle seals out, just a pry bar, pop them out, seal installer or a block of wood to reinstall with a hammer there, and should go pretty smooth. So we've got our Timken axle seals here, and this is my preferred tool for removal. It makes life easy. It's a little easier when it's in the car and mounted, just because you get no movement from the axle. And then you are going to need a hammer and a snap-on seal installer. These are the good ones. Don't forget to spend the money. So we'll pop this out here, knock that seal in, everything will be good. These ones are old and crusty, so they definitely should be done. They're not leaking yet. Seal out. Clean up a little bit in the flange here. I usually go in, just make sure that bearing wants to, well, it's not binding, or it's, make sure it moves smoothly. All right, so we got our new axle seals, our seal installer. Pretty straightforward. Square it up, get started, hammer, and then alternate back and forth until it's fully seated. Done. I'm gonna pull this axle bracket off, the anti-moan brackets, and then we'll get the axle slid in, get these trimmed up. They actually go on the inside of the flange and they go left to right. You actually flip them side to side so that the orientation ends up the same way. We'll get this knocked off and then figure out where we're gonna trim to slide them over the axle tube. All right, so we got our brackets off, and just mocking it up to do our cut to be able to fit this over the axle tube. Essentially just take it, hold it up, or you can even kind of hold it on the outside, go to the outside of the axle tube here, draw a line down. I'm going to cut on the outside of this yellow line here, and once you get that cut, take the other one, set it on here, draw the line in the same spot, then you'll have them match up perfectly fine. So this one, when it goes on here, will end up like this. And this will be on the bottom front side, so you will not even notice the void in the material there. So I'm going to get set up, grinder wheel, cut off wheel, get that opened up. All right, 2 cut axle flanges here. Clean them up inside with a flap disc. Try and get rid of any sharp edges there. And then this will just slide over the axle tube. Fits nice, lots of clearance. You do lose one bolt, but there's no way around that, unfortunately. If you wanted to try and cut between the bolt holes, it's not quite enough space. So you do lose one, but do it on the front side, top or bottom, whatever bugs you less visually, and then you'll retain the 2 rear there. And everything will be structurally sound.
I think the week just keeps going into that every day.
When you're shaking the can of paint and it ends up down there and then splatter on the floor.
Who left that tray there?
That was a setup.
I can feel it.
That was a setup. All right, rear end is out. Dale finished that up here. Pop the brake lines off, drop the shock bolts out. Everything else was undone. And of course, get the guy that's a little shorter to work on the lift when it's all the way up, so that he has to stand on a stool to actually be able to get it out. Tall guy problems here.
Thanks for that, by the way.
No problem, anytime. So getting these seized out bolts last night, I ended up cutting them some, and then that one really wasn't working good. Then I realized how rotted they were. Prime example there, like they're shot. So air hammer knocked all of them out. Needs all the bolts. This one here, wrong bolt, too short, nylock nut. It was on like 2 threads. This one here, well, I'll get you guys up in there. And if you can see, that is all, I'm trying to actually wear all the way through. So that was loose, and you can see it in the bolt, that the bolt had been moving back and forth in the hole, actually wore part way into the bolt. And somebody just kind of tucked a washer up in there to solve that. It didn't work. So I'm gonna have to weld a plate in there or a washer to try and keep that where it's supposed to be. It's got brand new upper control arms in it, and well, they look FoxBody. They're nice and clean, but one thing that doesn't make sense is this is the size of the bolt, and well, there's a lot of play there. Like, that is a 12 mil bolt in probably a 13 or 14 mil hole. These ones fit nice and snug. So if anybody knows what these could be from, because they have the right size hole on the diff end but the wrong size hole on the body end. So if anybody knows what fitment that might be, I'm kind of curious myself actually. All I know is it's wrong, and managed to find some hardware today, which was very challenging because everywhere is closed that actually carries proper hardware, and then all the parts stores have nothing more than grade 5. So managed to get that all sorted, and we've got these nice UPR control arms to go in. Gonna weld the plate in up there. Got those Cobra brackets, the axle flange brackets, painted up after doing a little finish work there. Let them dry. We'll work away on this lovely spot up top here, and then start putting axles in, brakes on, get this diff in. All right, we are all fixed up in that upper torque box area. Took a 12 mil washer, which is the size of the bolts, which for you Americans, it's the funny size in between 7/16 and ½ an inch. Oddball, but it is what it is. So I took a washer, welded it in there, ground it down, and we are all ready to go. Straightened, actually this portion of the bracket on the inside was bent in the middle, so straighten that out. Just a little bit of persuasion. Ready to go. Now it's time to actually bolt control arms in, get the axles in, brake flanges on, and we're on full reassembly stage now. So we got our bolts just going back in, little blue Loctite going through front side of the axle flange. We're using the nuts that were on the backside originally. There was 2 on each bolt, not sure why. So a little over top. Snug these up. Axle flange is on, camber died part way, tighten those up. axle shaft install. Put a little bit of gear oil on the inside of the seal just so it's not dry, less chance of damaging the seal. Slide the axle in. Wait till the bottom's out all the way. Then we go in here and we have our axle shaft end. C-clip goes on. That one kind of rotated around. Hopefully it didn't fall. Give it a little bit of gravity help there. And gravity is not being friendly. There we are, installed. Just pull the axle shaft back out a little bit here, and then back in goes cross pin and the bolt, which was a pain to get back out, but it does go in if you get it rotated down to around here. So get that back in, and then we're ready to go in the car. Making pretty good progress today. Things are fighting a little less than last night. Things are coming apart. It's refreshing. Alright, we've got this jacked up to ride height. There's actually no weight on the hoist arms anymore, so this is compressed as far as it's going to go. Now we're going to go through and tighten up the shocks, the upper and lower control arms, quad shocks, anything that's going to be traveling with suspension. I want it at ride height so that when it actually gets put on the ground, it's not going to be in a bind. If you have this at droop, tighten all the bolts, put it on the ground, you're going to have all that tension on all the bushings, and that causes all kinds of squeaks and pressure on, actually tension when you've got it on the ground and things don't ride properly. So take the extra time, do that. If you're doing it on the ground, just use a floor jack. Jack the differential up till it's off your jack stands. Nice and easy. One of the tricks for getting some of these springs in too, it's easier with lowering springs, but if you've got taller springs, you might need to actually compress one side. So let the whole differential drop, compress one side. It's going to allow that opposite side to drop down. Easiest when the shocks are disconnected. And then you'll actually get the differential to twist, get that spring in there. Then you may have to actually compress it to let the other side drop down to get the spring in there too. Just little things that make life go a lot easier. All right, time for some brake install. We've got the rotors on here, NECs behind the hubs. Got our brackets all nice painted up forward red. Using engine enamel. Going to install a little NECs on the pad clip surface here, and bolt this on. Test fitted a little earlier here, and a lot of people have said when doing 5-lug swaps, depending on axles and a couple other things, rotors, you may need to shim your caliper bracket with some washers back and forth just to get it centered in the rotor. We're lucky these ones fit perfect. Actually, it's all factory parts, so it is very nice that way. So we'll grab some hardware here and then slip this on. Then we'll slip some pads in here. Pins are nice and freed up and greased. We're good there. Slip the caliper on. Hook up our flex hose, and then we'll actually uncrimp the center line there. Just got it pinched off so we're not dripping brake fluid all over the place. Button everything up here, do a quick bleed, That's essentially a rear 5-lug Cobra brake conversion completed. Even though we had 5-lug on here anyways, it's all the same whether you have 5-lug before or after. We showed you essentially how to do a 5-lug swap since we were swapping axles in here, and the Cobra brake install. Everything's going to be the same for a 4 to 5-lug conversion using GT brakes as well. It's just different size rotors. The GTs are solid, these are ventilated. And your calipers are actually the same. The caliper brackets are a little wider to accommodate for the vented rotor, and they have this bar that runs across the center of them. So if you're looking at calipers to buy a set of used ones or something on Marketplace, look at this bar here and you'll be able to tell if it has that. It is Cobra brakes. The calipers are transferable there for you. So if you do find a good set of calipers that are even GT, you can find these brackets on places like Rock Auto. Only thing is they don't have them too frequently, and then you're mixing, which is fine if you want to go that route. If you can find a set that's matched up, even better. Well, this car kind of fights back once again. Last night was the bolts on the control arms. Tonight is actually putting the calipers on. Got the brake pads in here. Well, not on that side anymore, but pads are in here. Go to put the calipers on, and they are just a touch too thick. Looking up on some of the parts catalogs, there is actually minor variations in thickness. These ones are overall are 0.669 inches. I think some of the other ones were 0.57 or 0.59 inches. Wound the calipers all the way back, even tried taking off the shims here. It's still not going on, so we'll probably have to get another set of pads, put them on. So something to be mindful of, and when we get those other pads, I will let you know what they are, what brand they are, and that way if you're doing this, you can try and avoid running into this. These are actually a Bosch ceramic pad, but they do physically, when you look at them, the friction material does look thicker than the average pad. But there's multiple other brands out there that are running the exact same thickness as that. These also work on a GT rotor, which is a solid rotor, not a vented. So they may actually fit perfectly fine on that. You might have a little more leeway in there because they do run the same brake caliper. So not going to work for our application. I will let you guys know what pads we end up going with. But for now, tonight, we are at a halt. Can't do anything on the front because we only got one ball joint today. So can't tear that apart and press the ball joints in to put the spindles on. So looks like that's going to be a little later in the week. But for now, we're going to call it quits. Try again tomorrow or Monday. New day back in the shop. Got the rear brakes finished up on this. Pads came in on Monday. Dale was able to get that buttoned up. The thinner brake pads. There was a little discrepancy in the listing. So going on our parts ordering site, picking Cobra ventilated rotors, 95, 96, so SN95, and it's still, when we got doing some digging down in the actual manufacturer part number for these brake pads, even though you picked Cobra, which only has ventilated rotors, it's still, once you did the breakdown and got down into some of the fine notes, showed pads for a GT under a Cobra. So we ended up finding the correct number, which was a BE627AH. The incorrect part number for solid discs is BE627H. So just keep that in mind when you're doing these swaps. There's not that much of a difference, but it's enough that these calipers do not want to go back on. So you can cross those numbers there. That's a Bosch number, but I'm sure just putting that in, you'll be able to cross over to whatever your local parts store carries, and then you'll be able to get these things back together and looking nice and fresh. So we're all finished up here. Put these wheels back on, torque them down, then we're on to the next. I hope this information was helpful for any of you that are trying to do these Cobra or 5-lug brake conversions, wheel conversions, axle conversions, and get more wheel options. These are just stock wheels, but you can even just put stock wheels on for now until you find exactly what you want. But you've got bigger brakes, so these are even bigger than a GT. They're ventilated rotors, and it's just more modern. So hope that helps you guys out. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.